Hello and welcome to GearHeads. My name is Jesse and today we're working on my wife's 2007 Ford Mustang GT. So this car's got about 135,000 miles on it or so, and it still has the original shocks on it. So needless to say, they are not performing well anymore and they're pretty much blown, and it's time to replace them. Now when you go to do this job, there's a few things to think about. If you want to lower your car, now is the time, because when you're replacing the front struts, that's the time to swap out the springs if you want to do that. This car actually already has about 1.5 inch lowering springs on it. So I'm just going to be reusing those, but we're going to be replacing the factory shocks with some Bilstein struts in the front and then Bilstein shocks in the back. So there is a ton of options out there as far as shocks and spring combinations and everything else. So just make sure you do your research and pick something that you're going to be happy with. The truth is, most of the shocks and struts out there for this car, there's a lot out there. Most of it's really cheaply made crap. Bilstein, you can't go wrong. Very good quality, an upgrade over the stock stuff. Although honestly, these are so bad, AutoZone shocks would probably be an upgrade over what's on here now. But in any case, just make sure you do your research and pick what you want. And so yeah, we're going to go ahead and replace the front struts. I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and then we'll move to the back and work on that. Along with that today, I'm also going to be replacing the lower control arms and the inner and outer tie rod ends. But those will be separate videos, so keep your eyes out for those videos if you want to know how to do that as well. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so obviously most of you guys are probably going to be doing this without a lift. That is totally okay. This job is completely doable on the ground. Just make sure you jack the car up safely on jack stands before you start any work. And also, if you're doing it on the ground and you don't have access to power tools like I'm going to be using, then make sure you do yourself a favor and break your lugs loose. You don't need to obviously don't take your wheels off. Just break them all a little bit loose before you lift the car up the ground. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of fun trying to, break it loose while the wheel's sitting here spinning. So anyway, go ahead and take your wheels and tires off and we'll move to the next step. So we're going to start by taking the outer tie rod end off. So I always leave the key in the ignition, not in the on position. But if you turn your key forward and then off, it should leave your steering wheel unlocked. And that's nice because then you can move it with your hands like this. Now you're going to need a 17mm to take this off right here. So now to get this tie rod end out, there's a few different methods you can use. You can get a pickle fork and bash it in between here, and that can help separate it. There's also different presses and pullers and stuff that you can buy. I'll make sure I leave some links in the description to different tools that might be helpful for you, because if this method doesn't work, you might need something like that. But for me, at least, being in California with not as bad a rust, most of the time all you've got to do is hit the knuckle right here with a sledgehammer. It might take several hits. But usually you can break them loose that way, so let's go ahead and try it and see if it works. Let's see. There we go. So that one was not too bad and it came out pretty easily. Like I said, if that doesn't work though, you might need a pickle fork to jam in here to separate them, or use a press or a puller. So removing the tie rod from the front side of the knuckle is optional if all you're doing is replacing your strut assembly, but I like to do it just because it makes it easier just to move the knuckle around and maneuver things. So what you want to do first is turn it all the way towards the inside, and I'm going to go ahead and take the caliper and the rotor off and get them out of the way. So if you have, brakes that have some miles on them, you might have a little bit of a ridge on your rotors. What I like to do is take a big C-clamp like this, just slightly compress the pads in. Alright, and then once you've got it compressed in, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, you should be able to have no problem getting it off. And now you're going to have two 15mm bolts on the inside in here holding the caliper bracket. Don't take this upper one and this lower one off right here. That's just going to remove your caliper from the bracket. You want to just take the whole assembly off as one piece. Alright, and now that we did that, you can see this basically slipped right off very easy. Now you're going to want to either get some caliper hangers or maybe a bungee or something to hold this up. You don't really want to leave it hanging by the brake line. And you'll notice inside here there's going to be a 10mm bolt also that holds the brake line onto the strut. That's obviously going to need to come off as well. So for 1 second here, I will hang it by the spring because we haven't taken that out yet, but just give me a second here. All right, take that 10mm off for the brake line. And make sure you set that bolt aside and don't lose it, since we're not putting it back in the strut because of the fact that we are obviously replacing the strut. So let me get this back up here, and I'm going to just go ahead and hang the caliper back over here and keep it supported off of the lower control arm for now. All right, with the caliper off, go ahead and take off your brake rotor. Looks like this one's sticking. If you're not replacing them, then be careful because you don't want to damage it, but if I tap the face of it, it might knock it loose. It's just rusted into place. Oh, come on. All right, if you have a brake rotor stuck like this, you might have to get creative in getting it off, but I'm going to stick a pry tool back here. I don't want to pry on the reluctor wheel for the ABS, so I found a bolt here. So I'm just going to hold on to it while I hit it with a hammer and see if it'll pop loose. Just keep prying against it. Come on. There we go. So I was only hitting this portion of the rotor because the brakes aren't quite gone yet. I don't want to replace them today. I'm spending enough money on everything else. You just want to make sure you're not hitting their edge. If you're replacing these though, then by all means, if you got one stuck like that, then just start spinning it in a circle and hit it from the back side of the rotor as far away from the center as possible, and you'll get the most leverage, and you should be able to pop it off that way. So next we're going to want to take off the sway bar end link. It looks like the boots are trashed on this thing. They should probably be replaced soon as well. That'll be another day though. But in any case, to take that off, you're going to want an 18mm to bust that nut loose. There you go. So as soon as that nut's loosed, the most likely thing to happen is what it just did just there. As soon as you get it loose, the whole tie rod's going to want to keep spinning. So now the easiest thing to do is get an 8mm on a gun, or you can do this with hand tools of course as well, but the fastest way is get an 8mm like that and then hold the nut with a wrench. So instead of you know, pulling this on reverse, you're actually going to put the you're actually going to act as if you're tightening the rod there. So hold on, let me make sure this is going the right direction. So there we go. That's lefty for loosey and then righty for tighty. There you go, and you can see that literally just pushed itself right out. All right, and you can go ahead and just put the nut back on the end link so you don't lose it and lay it back out of the way. And now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and replace these bolts here. So from the factory, the Mustang actually just had 2 fixed bolts here. It was not adjustable camber. Somebody put lowering springs on this. It has Steeda lowering springs. And when you do that, it's a good idea to get some camber bolts, which is nice that you can buy them and add them on here. Problem is, whoever had this car before put the camber bolt on the bottom on this side and the top on the other side, and the camber bolt is supposed to go on the top if you have one. So the stock bolts are going to be an 18mm on the front, a 21mm on the nut on the back so you can hold it. You shouldn't even really have to hold it though, because it's got its own tail on it here to keep it from spinning. So in any case, I'm going to go ahead and take that top bolt out, and we'll take the camber bolt out, and then the knuckles should come away and just kind of hang out of the way, and then we just got to pull the nuts out of the top to pull the strut out of the car. All right. Well, nice. And you see how easily that slid? That shouldn't do that. I didn't even loosen the bottom one yet. So the bottom one obviously was not very tight and is loose, considering that I can easily rotate on it like that. So now I'm gonna go ahead and take this nut off, and then I should be able to get the camber bolt out. Ow, okay. All right, well that's extremely, I guess it must be just rusted because I can't break it loose with my hands. So I'm gonna hit it with some WD-40 and maybe heat it up with a torch as well. All right, MAP gas torch like this works great for heating things up to get them broken loose. All right, I really honestly only am trying to heat up that nut itself. I'm not trying to heat up the bolt. So this thing does spin, see, but it doesn't want to come loose. So let me see with the ratchet on the back if I can get it off with this gun. There we go. Yeah, lovely. All right, and be careful getting this out. I'm tapping it with a hammer, but don't hit this too hard because you don't want to deform the threads on it. If you want to hit it pretty hard, what I would do if I was you is thread the nut on like that most of the way, and tap it with that. So this should come out, but it's all kind of rusted together. So part of this problem is I think the cam on the camber bolt was hanging up on the spindle. So I just kind of turned it while pushing, and then it seemed to slip right out like that. So let me take the nut off. There we go. I'll show you what was happening. All right, so you can see this aftermarket camber bolt has this cam right here. And what was happening was I was trying to take it out. It was sticking on this shoulder. This shoulder was catching on the inside of the spindle here. So in any case, like I said, I kind of just was rotating it while I was pushing the nut, and it broke free like that. So now you can see the spindle is free. I'm gonna go ahead and set this down. Like I said, this was in the bottom. It should be in the top. So when we go to reinstall these, that's what we're gonna do. And before we lower the strut out, make sure you disconnect your ABS wire. Just get a little pry tool like this and pry back on the push clip here. There we go, and now that is free. All right, so now you just gotta come up to the top side, and you'll have 4 13mm nuts here holding the top of the strut on. All right, don't do that in case you lose it. Sorry, I was holding the camera with one hand. Lucky for me at least, that nut hit the ground so I didn't lose it, so. All right, you see it loose now. I've got one more holding it in. Now just reach underneath here so it doesn't fall to the ground and damage your brake line or anything. Okay, hold on. Let me put that nut in the magnet tray. And come down here. Woo! There you go. Now the strut is out. All right, now depending on your level of comfort, your level of skill, and everything else, this part may be something that you want to take to a shop and just have them do for you if they have a spring compressor like this, because obviously not everybody has one of these in their garage. In any case, obviously that's what I'm going to use. It's the safest thing. Now, I will tell you, you can go to an auto parts store. You can buy small spring compressors like this style right here. You can also buy a clamshell style one. Personally, I don't like to use these unless I absolutely have to. They're not really that safe. They're called Widowmakers for a reason. The clamshell style ones are definitely safer, but even still, those run a couple $100. So if you're not the kind of person that's going to be doing this very often, you might want to just take your strut assembly as is to a shop, pay them whatever they want, 50 or 100 bucks or something, to swap all your springs and, you know, over to the new struts and be good to go. In any case, like I said, not going to be using these. Fun fact though, I almost never use these, but the last time I did was on a Ferrari 458, adjusting the ride height on that because none of the other spring compressors we had would actually fit it, and these ones did. These cheapies from O'Reilly's or something. Anyway, I'm gonna go put these away and we're gonna start working on this. I'll show you guys how I do it, and then if you wanna get your own tools and try using these or try using a clamshell style one, then go ahead. All right, so first you're obviously going to want to compress the spring. You can either do it by the top hat to the lower springs, or depending on your compressor, you might just grab the coils in the middle and compress the whole thing without the top hat. In any case, this also will be a good time to replace your top hat if it needs them. I am not replacing these ones today, and I'm going to try doing this first. You can see I put some WD-40 on here and let it soak for a minute. I'm going to try and bust it loose with this. If this doesn't work, we're going to have to put a wrench up here and a wrench down here and do it the old-fashioned slow way. All right. So there's a little trick to this actually. If you're holding it by the top hat, if you break it loose like that and it doesn't want to go, just let this come up a little bit. It'll put some pressure on it and it might help you get it off. Maybe not. Oh, maybe. Almost. Hey, there you go, look at that. All right, old one's on the ground. So before I put this on the new one, I wanted to compare a couple differences here. I know I mentioned the bump stop. I actually had to go look on Bilstein's website and follow their instructions for a second because that bump stop won't fit here. I did not know this, but I guess these specific Bilstein B6 struts actually have an internal bump stop, so you do not swap the old one over. If you are swapping to something other than Bilstein's and you're doing another twin tube setup like this, I would imagine you're very likely going to swap the bump stop over like that and then put your dust cover over the top of it. But on the Bilstein you do not. All you got to do is slide your dust cover on here, which it probably already came that way anyway, and then go ahead and put the spring and top hat back on it. Lift this guy up through the top hat. There we go. And then just make sure you rotate on the bottom of the spring to where it's actually going to match up with the perch, because the coil has like a stop on it. So twist this until it matches up with the bottom of the coil spring. Put your nut on with the washer, and this is a lock washer. Now I know I used a gun to take the other one off. You do not want to use a gun to install on the new one. That is a bad idea. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is get a ratcheting wrench, and then I'm going to need an Allen key for the top to hold this in place while we tighten it down. So these nuts are a 22 millimeter. So I've got a 22 millimeter here, and then the Allen key is a 7 millimeter. So we are going to, let's see here, that's not the right direction. Nope, I need to go this. All right, there we go. So I'm going to be tightening with the bottom one and have the ratchet on the top into the loosening position, and we will pull them together. This will also slightly compress the spring probably. All right, and right there is tight. So we are good to go. All right, take this back out of the compressor and we can go put this on the car. Okay, so putting this back together should pretty much be exactly the same as it was taking it apart. Go ahead and lift this up, get it through these holes, and get your nuts started on the top so it can hang from them properly. So if you are using camber bolts like I am, go ahead and put the regular one in first. Whoever had this in had the bolts going this way and the nuts going this way. The service manual shows it going the other direction. I don't imagine that that actually matters too much, but either way, let's see here. I might need to compress this down a bit. All right, yeah, so basically I'm going to get this down, put this bolt through the bottom hole first. There we go. All right, so I pulled that nut up a bit. That's still loose. You don't want to tighten that to where you can't rotate this anymore. So now we're going to pull this over. All right, so when you're putting the upper camber bolt in, you're going to want to make sure that this part of it with the washer with that little guide tooth on it, that needs to be pointing the same way as the top of the cam. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get this bolt in all the way. So I'll kind of show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and slide this up, get the bolt started, and then find the highest point for the camber there, and then line that tooth up with it, and then push this thing through, and it should fit. It's just a little bit finicky, but it should go. Wiggle and push. There you go. So that's it right there. So right now, that's pointed straight up. What I really want to do actually is probably point it more towards the back, because that's going to pull the camber in. If you want more camber, either way, the alignment shop's really the one that's going to mess with that, but I'm kind of just setting it up somewhat close-ish, I think, to where it's going to end up. So I turned that back, and now we need to go ahead and put our nut on it. So right now we should technically have extra camber because we're pulling the knuckle back this way, which will make the top of the tire lean in. All right, now I'm not over tightening anything because first off, you don't want to over tighten anything, but I'm also not going too crazy because the alignment shop's going to need to loosen these up to make adjustments. So now the strut is pretty much fully installed and we can start putting our brake stuff back on. We can put the end link back in. I noticed one small difference here that we had. The brake line is supposed to attach through here, and that was a threaded hole on the stock one, but it looks like, I don't know if that's supposed to self-thread. That doesn't make sense to me. There's no threads in this hole though. So I'm either gonna have to use like an M6 bolt with a nut to attach this brake line again. If you wanna be ghetto, you could use a zip tie. Or, I wonder if it'll self-thread because these are not normal bolts. Okay, well, look at that. It looks like the stock bolts actually threaded themselves in just fine. So if you do reuse the stock bolts, maybe just make sure you go straight. You can use a gun, maybe it'll make it easier, but that actually threaded itself in just fine.
All right, so let's run our sway bar end link up here. Get that installed. There we go. And don't forget your little clip here for your ABS wire. Put the brake rotor back on. And then we'll bring our caliper back up, and after the caliper's mounted, we'll go ahead and mount that. All right, and then reinstall our bracket here for the brake line. I'm surprised they made it so that it just self-threads like that. That's kind of interesting. I've seen it before on other parts, but not on a shock. There we go. All right, and now all we got to do is turn this back the other way or straight and pop the tie rod in. All right, now we are ready to put our outer tie rod back in. So go ahead and just turn the knuckle over. Slide that bad boy up. Here, I'll give you a better view here. There we go. Now you should be able to see better. All right, anyways, so this tie rod does have a spot up here, so if you need to, you can put a wrench on the top to keep it from spinning and tighten this down. Usually if I use a gun, I don't have to do that, but just so you know. There we go. So other than putting in the tie rod end, if all you're doing is changing out your struts, that is all you need to do for both sides in the front. It's the same. And then after this, we'll go ahead and run to the back and I'll show you guys how to replace your rear shocks. All right, so now that we're all done with the front suspension, we're gonna go ahead and change out the rear shocks. So the rear shocks are only 2 bolts. If your car is up on jack stands like it was, leave it there for now and go ahead and grab your jack, and we're going to lift up on the rear axle to take the weight off, and then we'll take the shock out. Okay, so we have the jack here and it's under the axle tube. What you wanna do is just kind of raise and lower, adjust just enough to where the shock is not hanging or holding the axle up, but you also don't want there to be force from the other way, just to make it easy to take the bolt out. So you need a 15 millimeter. There we go. And so for this part here, you can see this basically backed itself out. If you're having trouble getting this out, just look at the shock and see if the axle's hanging by it. If it is, then raise the axle just a little bit. And then the same thing also, if the shock's pushing down too hard against the axle, you might have trouble getting it out. So that's what you want the jack for, just to make it really easy to get it level. Now all we gotta do is go to the top and take the bolt or the nut off the top, and this will drop right out the bottom. So literally all you gotta do is pull this carpet right back here, and you've got one 15 millimeter right in here. There we go. And that should come right out. Let's go back down and yank the shock out. All right. And that lowers right out. Let's go grab the new one and put it in. So depending on what brand you get, some shocks may or may not come with new bushings. If you have to, you can take this bushing off the original shock as long as this isn't shot, and you can transfer it over to the new one. Bilsteins actually send you new ones. So take your nut off, slide this collar on, and then you basically have got these two guys here. It's never a bad idea, actually put some Vaseline, lube them up like this, and basically, yeah, you just set it like that, lift this up into the car, and then go ahead and bolt the bottom in, and then attach the, push this bushing in from the top side, and then the nut. All right, so just look up through this hole, slide the top of the shock up through it, and then, this part, if you want to push up on the shock, you can, or alternatively, you can lower with the jack. You can slightly lower the axle a little bit till it comes to the right height to make your life a little easier. See what I mean? Just like that. And now I can push this guy through, get the bolt through. Oh, come on. There it goes. And then get your retaining nut on the back side. All right, there we go. Bottom's installed. Let's go back up to the top. All right, make sure the little bump part on the bushing is what's facing down. Center it on this guy here. Put that top washer on, and then install your nut. So unlike the front, you are going to need a 17 millimeter wrench, and you are going to need a, a 5 millimeter Allen. and tighten it down that way. All right, so we got that guy tightened down. This shock is installed. Now all you gotta do is go do the exact same thing on the other side. All right, well that is how you install struts and shocks on your S197 Mustang. So this pretty much is the same for 2007 to 2014 cars. Now, by the way, I compressed those calipers in the front to get them off easily. If you do that, make sure before you get in the car and start it and go to drive it that you pump the brake pedal and pump those fill the calipers back up with brake fluid. You will have no pedal at first. Last thing you want to do is start your car, put it in gear, put it in drive, and then suddenly go to stop or whatever and back out of your spot and run over somebody or something or whatever. Be careful and make sure you pump those up. Don't forget that. So in any case, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions, then please leave a comment. I do my best to get back and help as much as I can. And hit the description. I'll make sure I leave links in there for tools, parts, and stuff like that. And yeah, that's about it. I'm glad I was able to make these videos for you guys. Look forward to doing some more Mustang stuff soon. This car is starting to get more miles on it. It's going to start needing work. And generally, you know, once something goes bad and needs to be replaced, I always like to upgrade it. So anyway, yeah, hope to see you guys again soon with this. So thanks again for watching, and as always, keep wrenching.